If I happen to somehow get this review out earlier than normal, then I want you to all know that it's 4:30 AM right now when I'm recording this, and the reason is simply that I bought Bill and Ted's Face the Music on Blu-ray, and I ended up staying up all night watching the whole trilogy, because I love Bill and Ted. Now let's talk about the RWBY episode. This time, instead of saying this was an episode of RWBY in a way that's like neutral or positive, this was an episode of RWBY in the less than stellar way. Let's talk about the stuff that was the B plot of this episode, the stuff that definitely was not the star attraction. Starting with Oscar and Ozpin. So first off, Hazel'S motivation. Hazel's motivations can be pretty much boiled down to, my sister died, it's your fault, I'm on Salem's side so I can kill you. And that's fine enough, the logical through line makes sense. Some people are just assholes. Maybe he's just an asshole who only gave a shit about his sister. That's fine. Not every character needs the deepest motivation as long as it's understandable, it's not completely irrational, or if it is irrational, it's pointed out explicitly and made clear to everyone that it's meant to be irrational. But then he says fucking, you lead children to their deaths against a threat they can't beat, which is Salem. And like, so sure, if Ozpin sent all of the children of Beacon to die at Salem's hands like he was Winston Churchill looking at Australia's military, then yeah, he'd have a point. Hazel would have a point. But there's something a little bit weird about that. Most huntsmen and huntresses would never even know about Salem. They fight to protect people. They do not fight to beat the Grimm in total. They fight to protect people from the Grimm. There's a big difference between stop the Grimm altogether and save people from dying, and in that regard, there's nothing actively wrong with what Ozpin is doing. I know some people might be saying, but Gretel died under supervision, so did Summer, and sending kids out to fight is immoral. And here's the thing. You have to think about this in the context of RWBY. This is a world where day in, day out, anybody not living in one of 4 locations is always at threat of being killed by a Grimm. Training people to save them makes sense. Is it okay to train kids? What the hell else would you train? Training people when they're young makes sense, and Beacon does not mistreat their students. We have no indication that any academy is harsh or gets students against their will. We get the opposite, in fact. Fuck, Penny goes on about how great Atlas is specifically. Is it okay to send them into harm's way? I can understand how that would be a bit morally murky, but we do have the precedent that they are trained first in supervised battles against single Grimm. Sending them out to fight wild Grimm in the open with supervision makes sense, because they need that experience. You don't want someone's first experience with wild Grimm to be when they take their first mission without any supervision or someone more experienced. If they go out on a mission just on their own, and that's the first time they face a Grimm, well, that's the fault of the system that has not trained them well enough. And I get, in real life you can argue that school's like that anyway, and it does not train students well enough to deal with the real world, and I could be completely on your side if you argued that. But this is a case where this is training them for the real world. This is sensible. This is what they need to know. Now, of course, supervision is of the utmost importance, and I do blame whoever was not there to ensure the safety of Hazel's sister on her death. That was a bit of an oopsie. And in that regard, I do get his motivation. In the end, it is the responsibility of the headmaster to ensure their students are safe, especially with what the students at Beacon and all those places have to do. But the general idea of training kids who are willing and want to learn how to do their job and giving them first-hand experience with supervision and guidance makes sense within the world of RWBY. Obviously, in the real world, it'd be different. It'd be different if you were like, oh, kid, you want to join the military? Go to a military school and then go out there and have experience fighting an actual war. Don't do that. That would be stupid. But we don't have an analog to the Grimm in real life. Because they exist, this is fine. This is fine, especially in a world with aura, where like a stray hit is not likely to kill you if you don't see it coming, or if the person supervising doesn't see it coming, because you're likely to have a full aura at that point. Or if you lose your aura, the person supervising you will probably take you away to safety, right? So this is fine, and like most of the people who were trained to fight Grimm, like RWBY, would have gone out to fight them anyway. Like, it wouldn't matter if they were trained or not. They would have gone out to try and fight them, and they likely would have died with less training and supervised experience, right? Ozpin isn't sending people out to fight a war they can't win. He is training people who want to learn how to protect others, how they can protect others. Fuck, he actively tries to avoid getting the students involved in his affairs. Like, he did get Team Stark involved, we have no idea on what point though. And even then, the only one to have died was Summer, who ran off on her own and he had no idea about. He had no idea about her running off. The only student we see get involved is Pyrrha, and that is because he really didn't have a choice there. He had to choose someone, and he could have gone the third year candidate, I guess, because that makes sense, but Pyrrha was the main character, so it had to be her. So Hazel, that's kind of a stupid point to make. Your motivation being join Salem because you can't be stopped anyway, and Ozpin got my sister killed so he can get stuffed is good and fine. I don't mind it being simple, but don't go on about how Ozpin is in the wrong for sending students to die when he doesn't do that. Unless you count Team RWBY and Juniper, in which case none of them have died yet, except Pyrrha, who he did not have a choice in. And Ozpin doesn't get a choice in whether or not RWBY and Juniper go off anyway, he's just tagging along. And that was after you joined Salem, you idiot! Next up, there's Watts contacting Tyrion, and, I didn't bring it up because I forgot to, but Watts grabbing that scroll was most bogus. Watts grabs it, and Ironwood should have seen him in the corner of his eye, and also should have known better than to not make sure his scroll wasn't taken back for him. Idiot, and nobody patted Watts down, nobody searched to make sure he didn't have it with him, or didn't have anything on him. Why wouldn't you do that? And I'm also to believe that he repaired this, and also got a message to Tyrion without anybody seeing him do it. Robin would make a ruckus if she saw him doing something suspicious, because, who cares about whether Atlas are her enemies or not, because she's probably going to be more concerned about stopping the psycho madman who crippled Mantle when he's being sus. And also Tyrion's getting credit because of Watts called him. I mean, seriously, if Watts is called the Hound, would the Hound have gotten credit? Is Tyrion seen as useful because he's the only one in the other core 3 dudes who carries around a phone? That's so dumb I could believe it. There's some big stuff setting up in the next episodes, and good thing Ironwood, who lives in a place right near Grimm that can burrow into the dirt, doesn't have anything in place to stop them from tunneling into the dirt and destroying his shields. I can't believe Ironwood's defenses are so shit and easily dealt with, and honestly Salem could have done this at literally any time. I was hoping the scenario would be that she needed someone in Atlas like Watts to disable it through some malarkey, but no, she could have done this whenever, and nobody can kill her, so she would have had no trouble just beating Atlas. Just ram your fucking whale into it, kill most of the military, walk in, kill Ironwood, and take what you need. Now let's talk about Cinder. Cinder is a bad character, and the backstory has not changed that in my eyes. Before, she was a bad character with no backstory and boring motivations. Now she's a bad character with a boring backstory and boring motivations. Now, having boring motivations isn't necessarily a bad thing, as long as a character's personality and intimidation can carry them. I think she was fine in Volume 3, because she was in the background for the most part, so her strength didn't really matter, and she was entertaining enough to watch, though it really was carried by Mercury and Roman in that regard. But honestly, nowadays she could really just be replaced with a cardboard box with boobs and maiden powers. She's bland, she's not improved, she lacks any real presence, I don't care about her, but they gave her a backstory, so let's judge it. I was fine with her not having a backstory, but what I really wanted was more clear-cut motivations, and they didn't really give her that. We already knew that she was after power, because reasons, and we don't, just knowing that her reasons are because she was treated like shit is we kind of guessed that because her name is Cinder after Cinderella, and it manages to be the most expected thing I've expected from RWBY anyway. Something has been in the back of my mind, I never really cared to bring it up, but my full expectation would be that Cinder's backstory would just be Cinderella without the fairy godmother and an evil Prince Charming, and that's for the most part what it is. Awful adult female with terrible stepsister, treat her like shit, she meets this charming young bloke who they didn't name drop in the episode, I don't think, because I had to check the credits for it. But this time, she kills him because he tried to kill her. Rhodes. Rhodopis, the ancient Greek tale is believed to be the first version of the Cinderella story. You think you're fucking clever. But, this is dumb. This is fucking dumb. So, ignoring that the whole evil step-lady, or evil not-quite-mother, beating her up, and the fact that if anybody happened to walk in who was not a fan of child abuse, would have maybe seen that, and could have easily done something about it that could have really screwed the lady over, meaning that it was really not very smart to do the whole bad child treating, because she's 10. I don't think many people are going to walk in and be okay with slavery and child abuse of a 10-year-old, but that's not really RWBY's fault as much as it is the fault of all the other things that it is copying. However, Rhodes decides to train Cinder to become a huntress, but why don't you just take her away? Give her a place to live that doesn't treat her like shit. Just send her to a primary school, like Signal. Why don't you do that? Okay, maybe it's illegal to steal someone. Why don't you buy her? Just buy her. She was bought. Buy her. Give her a lot of money. If you really cared, you would spend money to buy her and take her in. If all she knows is how to fight, then going to an academy like Atlas or Beacon is not going to fix much. She has no social skills, no formal education, no idea on history, which we know is the subject, no idea on Grimm, nothing. she wouldn't be too great. She'd flunk really quickly because her only talent is fighting, and it'd be weird if having good fighting talent is all you needed, because why would you have the other subjects then? Because they're not adding anything, really. I mean, they really are, like actual school, technically mostly unimportant for what they're learning to do. And then he sees this young teen who spent a lifetime of abuse killing the people that abused her, and his first thought is to cave her fucking skull in. I mean, yeah, he wasn't trying to kill her, I'm sure, but come on. Anybody with half a brain, or at least, if I saw someone who I had known for years, I've known them for years, since they were 10, and now they're a couple of years off 17, let's say I've known them for 5 years, and I know for a fact they've been living a lifetime of abuse, and I see her with a goddamn shock collar on being zapped, and she's murdering the people who attacked her, or murdering the people who abused her, my first thought would not be to attack her. My first thought would be to see how she is, comfort her emotionally, and just make sure she's okay, for one thing, because it wouldn't be any better if she had a horrible injury as well and she ended up dying. But I'd comfort her, I'd see what happened, I'd learn the situation. I wouldn't pull out a goddamn mace and try to cave her skull in. Also, Rhodes is such a weak huntsman that Cinder takes his aura out in 3 hits. 3, and his aura is gone. Now sure, he takes hers out in 2, but he is a grown adult hitting a teenager and an experienced huntsman who we know has been at this for at least several years. Are you kidding? Before this review is over, I want to leave you on 2 things. 1, that song that plays when Cinder was scrubbing the floors and shit was the most edgy fucking shit I've ever heard. It's hilarious how evil and meany bad guy the lyrics are. Casey Lee Williams is a good singer, why can't you have her sing good songs? And secondly, I legitimately popped when I heard Mercury's voice, I was so happy. That made me happier than anything this volume. Mercury is great, and hearing him speak from off screen and then showing up and being an asshole and a real character, that was amazing. I love that. It single-handedly made this episode not a complete waste, because it had Mercury. I mean, he kind of saved this. I love this man. That's all I got for you, bye.